All right, folks, for the third time, I am happy to be joined by Mehdi Hasan, who is the founder of Zateo, progressive journalist, firebrand, and somebody who has been debating pretty much everybody. And Mehdi, I gotta say, there's something in the air. You are attracting the craziest people on the fucking internet. What's going on?
Am I attracting them or am I going seeking them out? I'm not sure what's worse. Yeah, I did this Jubilee debate that went a bit crazy with 20 far-right conservatives. I then debated a very prominent liberal Zionist, Jeremy Ben-Ami of J Street. Been all over the place. I actually did a debate with Michael Gove, a British prominent conservative politician who was defending Trump. That hasn't dropped yet, but it's going to drop in the coming days. And that was a big one as well in front of an audience in London. So I've been busy arguing and I don't know how to do much else. So I keep myself busy arguing.
Well, you wrote the definitive book about how to win arguments, and I'm curious at this point, do you feel empowered by arguments or debate, or are you exhausted by it? Because with what you've got going on with Zateo, your
Yeah.
coverage of the
Yes.
genocide in Gaza, all these things, like, are you still empowered by it, or are you exhausted?
I think it's a bit of both, really. I think I'm always empowered by a debate where I'm able to kind of make my points, get my arguments across, try and educate people, try and reach people in places where they're hard to reach. It's one of the reasons I did Jubilee for all the concerns that people rightly have about the Jubilee format. But it is exhausting as well. It's exhausting to have to kind of tell truth to people who either don't understand truth, don't get truth, don't want the truth, are deliberately manipulating the truth. It's exhausting to have to, fight to just say that human beings are equal, that democracy matters, that racism is bad. I mean, it's almost like we're starting society from first principles sometimes with some of these folks. We're no longer arguing about what is the right tax rate, what is the right level of deregulation, what's the best policy of reducing crime. It's now we're arguing about first principles. Are all people equal? Is racism bad? Is democracy important? And that is exhausting.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I remember it was either the first or second time we spoke, you were kind of relaying your experience as an immigrant, spending your time in England dealing with the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, and how, despite your many disagreements, I think the way you phrased it is they at least had some sort of tenuous grasp on reality, whereas the
Yes.
Republican Party is obviously a breed apart. Have you gotten acclimated at this point? Because the reason I ask is, if you and we have many things in common, but the thing I think we have the most in common is you and I get so fucking annoyed by the hypocrisy and the double standards that benefit the
Yes.
right in this country. So have you gotten used to it, or does it still get on your nerves?
Oh, I spent yesterday tearing my limited hair out over the coverage of Donald Trump going up on the roof of the White House. The sane washing that we saw from our media, from ABC and CNN and the New York Times. Trump takes an unusual stroll on the White House roof. Trump surprises by taking questions from reporters on the White House. Can you imagine if Joe Biden had gone up on the White House roof without any warning, wandered around aimlessly, and then shouted that he was building nuclear missiles to the crowd below? It would have been a multi-day news event, the biggest story on a loop on every news network, not just Fox. But with Trump, we sane wash Trump. So yes, the double standards, the hypocrisy is galling. I will never get over it. I will never be okay with it. And as for the UK point that you made earlier, I mean, unfortunately, the Conservative Party in the UK is, since we last spoke, has become more and more MAGA-fied. And one of the problems of having a second Trump term is his pernicious influence continues to extend both across the United States, but it's also across the world, right? He has normalized a form of crude, belligerent, racist, reactionary, anti-intellectual, anti-fact politics that other people say, hey, it works for the Americans, why not for us? So there is a global problem here with Trump as well, which means the longer he's around, the longer he's on the scene, the longer he's seen as a winner, and his people are seen as winners, the more it will spread and the more it will be normalized. And I think we've reached a point, let's just be honest, Donald Trump could disappear tomorrow and Trumpism is here to stay.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm thinking of Trump's, I do want to return to the Jubilee thing in just a second, but on that point, like, I'm thinking of Trump's like various counterparts in the UK, had a version of Trump, at least by our estimation, which was Boris Johnson. Now, I would argue Boris Johnson on his worst day, was
Yeah.
better than Trump on his best day.
Yes.
He's no longer prime minister. Yeah, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, who, by the way, you want to talk about a functioning democracy, Bolsonaro being held accountable in ways
Yes.
that we should be
For
envious
doing
of
much
here.
less, for doing much less than Trump did.
Vastly less. I mean, like, yeah, even the comparisons are a bit superficial because, sure, he never formally conceded, but he ordered his chief of staff to start the transition process.
Yeah.
The January 8th insurrection in Brasilia in 2023, that happened after
Yeah.
De Silva was, inaugurated. So yeah, like even there, Bolsonaro comes off more sane, but he's dealt with more harshly. And there was somebody, obviously, with what's going on in Netanyahu trying to fire his own attorney general, prosecuting him for corruption. So Trump is nominally on his second term, Mehdi. Like we're told, like this will be the end of him after 2029. We will no longer have to deal with him. You think that this is the tip of the iceberg, or where do you think we are in the
Yeah, I
process of the
mean,
Trumpification of the world?
so it depends what week you catch Trump in. When I interviewed Mick Mulvaney recently for my Al Jazeera English show, another debate I did recently with his former Trump term one chief of staff, Mulvaney went out of his way to say, of course, Trump will be gone. There'll be other candidates running for president. He's ruled out that he's going to run again. And I said, hold on. He ruled it out in one interview, but in another interview, he said, I'm not joking, I'm considering. And since ruling it out, and since I taped that interview with Mulvaney, he came out just yesterday and said, no, he's thinking about it. No, he would like to run again, he said, I think is the phrase he used. So he uses different phrases. Trump is a lot of things. But when it comes to communicating a message he wants to communicate, he's very good at it. This is the message he wants to communicate, that the door has been left open. He says again and again, he goes up to the edge. He doesn't say for sure that he's going to violate the 12th and 22nd Amendments of the Constitution, but he suggests, hey, nudge, wink. Wouldn't it be great? Don't I deserve a third term? Didn't I get robbed of my first term? Shouldn't I stay on? Don't people love me? Wouldn't I like to do it? And he does it in a very way of, he's very good. And I hate to praise him, but, evil genius praise. He's very good at laying the groundwork for outrageous things that he wants to do, but he takes time in laying the groundwork for it. And that's what they're doing right now. They are doing it so that, and they did it with birthright citizenship, and they're doing it now with the 22nd Amendment, which prevents a president from going 3 terms. They are laying the groundwork for the next few years to just keep nudging, winking, joking, suggesting until they actually do it for real.
So you think that we're going to see more of a worldwide phenomenon, though, of Trump, like outside the United States, no matter what happens to him, the Bolsonaros
Yes.
and everybody there, we're going to see more of those.
Yes, the fascist genie is out of the bottle. And to be fair, it preceded Trump, but Trump has put it on steroids. Like there were already authoritarians in power well before Donald Trump came on the scene. Putin, Orban, Modi in India, Netanyahu in Israel.
Erdogan.
But what Trump has done is mainstream that, right? Trump has mainstreamed that. By the president of the United States is an authoritarian. That's a very different message to sell to the world, and especially to the Western democratic world. And you look at the UK, like I would have told you a few years ago, Trump's not, UK has its problems, but a Trump is not possible in the UK. Even post-Brexit. Brexit was compared to Trump, the Brexit phenomenon, the Trump phenomenon. But even that was a very narrow, specific thing about Europe and immigration. British politics as a whole couldn't be Trumpified, could it? Answer is yes. Nigel Farage is now one of the favorites to be the next Prime Minister of the UK. He only has 5 seats in Parliament, right? You need over 300 and whatever it is, 20 seats, if memory serves me correctly, to be Prime Minister in the UK, to have a majority in Parliament. Now, on the one hand, it sounds insane to say you can't go from 5 seats to 300 something seats in one election. But anything's possible these days. I talk to informed folks in the UK who say, no, it is very possible that Nigel Farage could suddenly end up as the next Prime Minister of the UK because Labour is imploding. The centre-left, like here, has imploded, and the mainstream Conservative Party is gone. And therefore, the far right, the authoritarian right, the hard right, whatever you want to call them, is now the dominant force. And that is a very worrying moment. That Farage is the British Trump in many ways. And he's, in a sense, he's worse than Trump because he's much, much smarter and savvier than Trump.
Yeah, he made headlines I saw the other day because apparently he got into a bit of a back and forth with Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's one of my favorites, another intellectual heavyweight in the Democratic Party. I would love to see just throwing this out there, a Mehdi Jamie Raskin 2v2 against I don't know, Ben Shapiro and Scott Jennings. Just throwing some stuff out there for you.
Raskin is very good. Oh, don't say Scott Jennings.
Listen, I know you. I don't think you've been on CNN ever since that one asshole made the pager comment.
No.
Disgusting.
They haven't
person.
invited me back since then.
Well, if you ever go back, I hope one day you will have I don't know if I would call it displeasure or pleasure of sitting across from Jennings, because it just needs to happen. It just needs to happen, Mehdi.
The irony is that the night I went on, when I ended up with, what was his name, Ryan
Gudersky or something like that.
The guy who made the racist beeper comments and threats. That night, I thought I was going on with Jennings on Abby Phillips' show. I thought Jennings would be on the panel with me, and then I found out, Scott Jennings not on tonight. It's this guy Ryan Gudersky. I was like, who's he? And then who knew that it would then blow up into what it blew up into? But that's a great irony there. But I mean, the Scott Jennings is an interesting one. I was just tweeting about this earlier. He is a paid CNN commentator. He is now a CNN star. I mean, they promote this guy. He's one of their big marquee people. Every night, he's almost every night, whenever he's on air, he seems to be every night, he says something demonstrably false, right? And you wonder, this is not just a guest popping up from the right. He says something false, and CNN say, well, we have to have people from the right. We can't, we can't censor them. This is a guy they're paying and promoting to be on air to say things that everyone around that table knows is false. How is that journalism? How is that educating the public? How is that any kind of public service?
CNN's creating, he's the next MAGA star in so many ways. He has his own podcast now. He's like a darling of Donald Trump. He's referenced all the time by Joe Rogan and others precisely because he serves as the foil. I actually get offended.
I think he wants to run for senator, right, in
Kentucky. Yeah, that's entirely possible. He used to work for McConnell, as a matter of fact. And so, yeah, I mean, Jennings is so annoying. My favorite moment to this day was when Catherine Rampell humiliated him on live TV. Of course, I'd have to narrow that down. But, you're talking about Trump's authoritarianism and pushing the envelope and things. And I guess I want to close the loop on this before we return to some of the debates that you've had recently, which is you have an ongoing, I would call it a project, whether you realize it or not, working slowly on Piers Morgan on both Gaza and Trump. You've made significant progress with respect to Gaza. Congratulations.
But not on Trump.
Not on Trump. And I just don't understand this mentality of how is it that Piers and people like that give a shit about a random Twitter influencer making a comment about Sydney Sweeney, but not the words of the most powerful man on earth. I want you to square that for me. I don't get it. I don't think it's defensible.
It's not defensible. It can't be squared. And by the way, I'm one of the few people who has put Piers on the spot on this issue. And people can go watch the interview I did when he came on my show on Mehdi Unfiltered on Jessiah about a year ago, if memory serves me correctly. No, it was about October. It was just before the election in New York. And I actually put Trump's words to Morgan, the most racist things he said. I put the same quote to Mick Mulvaney, by the way, because it's a damning quote. People talk about, oh, is Trump a racist? Like the quote that you always need to have is the quote where he told 4 non-white members of Congress, the squad, 3 of whom were born in the United States, to go back to the countries from which they came. A, the most racist phrase anyone can say to a brown or black person is, go back to where you came from. B, he said it. C, we all know that those people, 3 of them were born and raised in the United States of America, and the other is an immigrant, Ilhan Omar, who is an American citizen. So when I put that quote to Piers Morgan, he couldn't defend it. You could go watch the clip. It went viral online. All he said was again and again, Mehdi, he's not a racist. I'm not going to say he's a racist. And I said, but these words, are the words racist? And he just dodged it, politician style, because you can't defend them, right? It is a nakedly racist statement that the president of the United States made in his first term. And therefore, to go back to your question, they know they can't defend the quote. So what they do is they dodge and they get into stuff about, oh, we don't know what's in his heart. Oh, he just speaks bluntly. Oh, he counterpunches. But they will never actually defend the words themselves. And the failure of our media is that our media doesn't remind people about the words themselves. Our media falls into the same trap as well. People say, oh, the media's tough on Trump. It's really anti-Trump. No, it's not, because if it did, it would actually put the words Trump uses to Trump all the time. We wouldn't just move on. He was on CNBC this week with his friendly Joe Kernan. Yeah. And even Joe, and people, by the way, people praised Joe Kernan for when Trump said to rig the 2020 election. Kernan said, oh, no, let's not relitigate that. Your own DOJ said it didn't happen. Number one, why aren't we relitigating that? He should call out Trump for that bullshit, not try and move on. Just like Terry Moran tried to move on when Trump said, oh, it definitely says MS-13 on his knuckles. And number two, why aren't we calling out what Trump has said about, when we talk about Trump's election denial, we talk about it like it's some academic exercise. Donald Trump questioned the nature of the 2020. No, he said batshit crazy things for months on end. He incited violence. His people came up with ludicrous conspiracy theories about Venezuelan dead dictators and Italian military satellites. Why have we moved on for this? He ruined the lives of a black mother and daughter election volunteer team in Atlanta who can no longer go out and shop because they're worried about getting death threats, right? Why do we not talk about this stuff? I think we should talk more about it. People say, oh, why are you obsessed with January 6 pardons? Because it's the worst thing he's done as president, and we all just moved on from it on January the 21st. He did it on January 20th. When was the last time you saw any Trump official or Trump asked about January 6 pardons? We just moved on.
No. What's even worse is, okay, I take your point on Kernan, but here's the sad thing, Mehdi, and I'm wonder if you've considered this. Kernan in that interview gave more pushback to Trump on the 2026 than any mainstream journalist in the past 4 months, because Trump still lies about.
The bar is so low.
Yeah, they just moved on. The last time I saw a mainstream journalist push back on this was Kristen Welker, And that was, I think that had to have been January. That may have even been before his inauguration.
It might have been. It might have been after the election. Yeah. No, it's insane. Like, Daniel Dale at CNN, who's the fact checker, a good friend of mine, Canadian, does the best fact checks out there of Trump, has been for the last decade nearly. I mean, all you have to do as a journalist, if you're interviewing Donald Trump, if you interview Donald Trump, it's very simple. Whether you're in the White House press briefing room, whether you're standing outside Air Force One, whether you're in the back of the plane, whether you're wherever you are, whether he's shouting to you from the rooftop of the White House, all you need to do is go to Daniel Dale's page on the CNN website and just print out the latest week of lies. He literally documents. Like, I mean, the Washington Post used to do it too, but they just fired their fact checker. Surprise.
Suspicious.
But Daniel Dale does this. He has like 7, 10, 15 every week. Just go through them and say, why did you say this? It's false. Why did you say this? It's untrue. That should just be a Trump interview. Ask him to justify the bullshit. The greatest gift the media gave Donald Trump is allowing him to lie at will for 9 years straight and never say, you're lying. Why should we believe you? Like, just take one example from the Kernan interview. He talks about, they revised the jobs number. He tries to justify firing the labor statistics chief. And his argument, I said it multiple times, is, well, they revised and fingers upwards for Harris. They did a good job. Sorry, they saved Harris from the bad numbers until after the election. False. The 800,000 downward revision in jobs numbers was in August of 2024. If it was a rigged system, they would have delayed it till December, right, after the election. The Democrats put out the right numbers in August, showing that unemployment was not as rosy a picture as they thought. So Trump is lying. He keeps saying it's there. August, the numbers are there. It's a fact. Why does no one say you are lying, Mr. President?
Or just too stupid. Like, that's the thing with Trump. Like, either way, it's almost like a crossroads or a pick your own adventure, and it ends at a pit no matter what.
Yeah.
He's either a pathological
No,
liar.
my position always is, you're saying liar or stupid, right? Those are
or cognitively impaired. One of the two. Like, he either is mentally unable to be president or he's a pathological liar. Either way, he's unfit for office.
Agreed. But my position on the cognitively impaired or dumb or stupid is I give him that at the beginning. So the first time he says something insane, you can give him that. Mm-hmm. But when he repeats it after being corrected, then he's just lying, right?
Fair.
The definition, when people say, we don't know what's in his heart. We do actually. If you say something false, then I don't know what's in your heart. It might be a mistake. Okay, maybe it's not a lie. Maybe you got it wrong. Maybe you misheard, misremembered. But when someone says that's wrong, and then you say it again the next day to someone else, then it's a lie. There's no debate about that. Case closed.
Yeah, you brought up the Terry Moran thing, and I'm, again, just throwing this out there. I don't know if you've thought about it, but given that Moran has gone independent, and I know shortly afterwards he did a bunch of like marquee interviews, I think it'd be great if you interviewed him, because one of the points that you made at the time is he should never have moved on from the Kilmar Abrego Garcia Knuckles thing. The interview should have stopped right then and there, and you spin tires until they kick you out of the Oval Office. And I would like to know why he chose to move on. He basically did everything in his power.
Let's try and ask him.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. Let's see if he'll do the
interview. Let's ask him.
And then the other thing is, you mentioned Mick Mulvaney, and as great as or as I should say, I don't know if I'd even call it great, as iconic as the Jubilee interview was. It's gone viral. I think it's like, I saw it like 4 days ago. I checked on it again. It was already like 10 million views. I think it's like one of the fastest growing, viewed Jubilee debates. And I think it's going to rapidly catch up with the Ben Shapiro one from about a year ago. As interesting as that was, and I know it went viral and you did a lot of coverage on it, to me, the Mick Mulvaney one was in its own way even more interesting, because this is a man who, as chief of staff, for my audience watching, you're basically the hand of the king. You're the second most powerful person in the country. And Mick Mulvaney has betrayed every principle and every criticism he's professed to have before he became chief of staff and after and you brought the receipts right then and there. I'm curious, what was your reaction to the Mulvaney thing? Because he sat there and took it, and he tried to defend himself. How did you feel about that? Because that interview needs attention.
The thing about the Mulvaney debate is kudos to Mulvaney that he agreed to fly out to London to sit in front of a live audience of Trump critics and take questions not just from me for an hour, but from Christina Greer, the academic Trump critic, and George Conway, former Republican, now never Trumper. So kudos to him on that. Having said that, though, I was deeply disappointed to see just how loyal he was to Trump. I thought he would do a kind of, I agree with him on this, but I disagree on that. The classic, I support some of his policies, but I'm not a Trump, I'm not MAGA. But he was pretty much loyal down the line across most. The only thing I think he dissented on was ICE agents shouldn't wear masks. But he defended the general deportation strategy. He defended the illegal deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He denied the torture in El Salvador. On every major issue, he defended Trump on the racism issue. I put the point about telling the squad to go back to work. He refused to acknowledge it was racist. So it's a reminder that the Republican Party is still the cult of Trump, and even the people who used to be like, oh, we're not MAGA, are pretty much down the line behind Trump, either out of sycophancy or fear or a bit of both. And that is quite depressing. That in the second term of Trump, he's stronger than he's ever been with his own party and with the conservative media in terms of his control of it. So that was disappointing there on Mulvaney.
Yeah, no, I mean, people should check out that interview. Like I said, that one is up there in its own way with the Jubilee one. You also had appearances on Pod Save America and with Jon Stewart. We'll just go through those real quick. I thought the Jon Stewart interview was excellent. You guys had a great rapport. You even asked him the question, and he did not give an answer. Do you know what I'm going to ask you about?
About running for president.
Yes. So could you talk about that for a second?
So, I mean, look, Jon Stewart is a super smart guy. He's become super political in recent years. I think his politics have changed a bit, or maybe they're more transparent. Now, there was a time when some folks used to criticize him for being the kind of, do you remember the March for Sanity and trying to find bipartisanship and middle ground? I think John, like everyone else, has seen what's happened to American politics and recognizes that if that era ever existed, it certainly doesn't exist now. And he's been very strong in calling out both Republican attacks on democracy in the media, but also in terms of economic policy, taking a much more left populist stance on corporations and money in politics. So his policy agenda, if you could call it that, is very strong on the left. And look, we live in an age where celebrities are now touted for presidential candidature because of Donald Trump. I'm actually anti the idea of celebs running for president. I don't think the Democrats should have their own version of Trump. But if a celebrity was to run, I'd rather it be someone like a Jon Stewart who actually understands politics, understands the media, has a strong moral backbone, is a wonderful communicator, which is what Democrats lack most, communication skills. So in that sense, look, it's interesting. If you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, Jon Stewart, is he going to run for president? I said, no, don't be silly. But the fact that he just wouldn't just go, don't be stupid, I'm not going to do that, I thought was interesting. I have now begun calling for, and I will continue calling for, him to run for New Jersey senator and primary Cory Booker. Jon Stewart is from New Jersey. Cory Booker is now one of the worst Democrats in the Senate. So I think as a stepping stone to the White House, at least, Jon Stewart, I mean, Al Franken did it in Minnesota, comedian, SNL, to Senate, and was a very good senator prior to this, quote unquote scandals that brought him down. I think Jon Stewart should primary Cory Booker.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I saw that for the first time, because he, of course, Kyle Kalinske, so many of our mutual friends and acquaintances have been calling for Stewart to run for some time. That was the first time that I've ever seen him not dismiss it out of hand. I clocked it. I don't know if anybody else did other than you, but people should definitely check out that interview as well. We will turn to Cory Booker in just a second, but I want to close the loop on your recent debates and interviews, the high-profile ones lately, which is you were also in a Tommy Vitor moderated debate with the head of, was it J Street? What was that?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you
J
talk
Street,
about that? Because that was fascinating. I typically stick to domestic policy because foreign policy was my weakest area in college. I consumed that. That was interesting. It was the best faith debate that I've seen on the topic in some time. And then something interesting happened after the debate. I don't know if I would call it a concession, but certainly a shift. Can you recap what happened and then give me your reaction to this?
I think you can call it a concession. So I debated Jeremy Ben-Ami, who I've known for years. I've been friendly with for years. He's the head of J Street, which is a liberal Zionist organization. It calls itself pro-Israel and pro-peace. J Street came under some stick after October 7th because it backed Netanyahu's war on Gaza. It didn't call for a ceasefire till I think about January 2024, by the time of which tens of thousands of Palestinians had already been killed. So it came late to the anti-war position. It is currently anti-war. Jeremy has been very critical of the war in Gaza. He has picked fights with more Zionist groups like AIPAC and has said, what Netanyahu is doing is horrific. It's a moral atrocity. What he won't say, however, is that it's a genocide. And he and I debated about whether or not it's a genocide. He said, as a descendant of Holocaust survivors, as someone in the Jewish community, that word is very provocative. It's not a word he thinks should be used or is accurate. And I made the case for why it should be used, because Palestinians have a right to tell their truth, and why it's accurate, because it meets the definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention. And some of the world's leading genocide scholars, including Israeli Holocaust historians like Omar Bartov from Brown, Amos Goldberg from the Hebrew University, Raz Siegel, Shmuel Ederman, they've all come out and said, hey, it's not the Holocaust, but it's certainly a genocide. We know what we're talking about. And what was interesting, he wouldn't budge on that show. It was an hour-long discussion, which he said Tommy did a great job of moderating. But a couple of days later, he wrote a blog post for his site, and he said he will no longer object to people using the word genocide. He said he still personally wouldn't use the word, but he said he can no longer deny that it is a genocide, and he wouldn't object to people calling it a genocide. So good for him for being open-minded. I wish he'd come to this a bit earlier. But also, to go back to what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation as we wrap up, debates matter. Like people tell me there's no point debating anything anymore. Everyone's just in their own tribe, their own, their own echo chamber. The algorithm's just keeping us all apart. It is possible. And you've mentioned two examples in the show. I do think I managed to move Piers Morgan on Gaza, and I do think I managed to move Jeremy Ben-Ami on genocide. I do think, look, you can't debate everyone. There are a lot of bad faith people out there. There are a lot of ignorant people out there. I don't think anyone in the Jubilee debate changed their minds for sure. Not in the 20, maybe watching at home. None of those 20 folks changed their minds for sure after I debated them. But there are still places you can go have a good faith discussion and hopefully change people's minds.
Yeah, no, it was a truly impressive moment because it's the first time in a long time that I've seen somebody like you could track the moment where they've gone from one position to the other. Like Piers was a work in progress for the longest time. So it definitely like two hot time horizons on this issue. I want to close with two things though, because we mentioned Cory Booker. And I'll just go ahead and lay it out here. I am very much, when it comes to electoral politics, a vote blue no matter who guy. If the alternative is a Trump Republican, I don't care if it's a centrist Democrat or if it's a progressive Democrat. The Democratic Party on its worst day is just better than the Republican Party on its best day. And I was really disappointed that when Senator Booker was asked point blank about Zoran Mamdani, who is the Democratic nominee to be mayor of New York City, he dissembled. And to me, it's like, if you're a moderate and you expect progressives to basically shut up and vote blue if a moderate is the nominee, then it's got to cut both ways. And he just threw a wrench into that. So I'd like to know what you feel about that. And then we're going to close on the gerrymandering war.
I'm glad you brought up the blue no matter who, because lefties, progressives, Bernie supporters, etc., were told for years, vote blue no matter who. You've got to get behind the Democrats because, as you said, understandably, Democrats on their worst day tend to be better than Republicans on their best day. And I think that hypocrisy has been shown here. And I think it will cause lasting damage to Democratic voting strategies come 26 and 28, when they tell people to get, let's assume the Democratic nominee is a centrist come 2028, is a quote unquote moderate. It's going to be very hard to get Bernie supporters to come out for that person on the grounds that you must support the Democratic candidate, because they will say, you didn't support Mamdani. The hypocrisy is there. He won the Democratic primary fair and square, and he won by a landslide, right? And these are the same people who embraced Eric Adams when he won narrowly. Mamdani has not been embraced. So number one, you're right. The hypocrisy is clear. It will damage the Democrats down the line. Number two, it's not just Booker, right? It's Gillibrand, it's Schumer, it's Jeffries, it's Governor Hochul. None of them have endorsed the Democratic mayoral candidate. And when asked, they've hidden behind excuses about, oh, he didn't condemn this or that phrase that he's never used. It's all bullshit. Even Joe Walsh, right-wing Republican, who's now joined the Democratic Party, he's like pro-Israel guy. He and I have fought about his horrifically bad views on Israel.
I remember that Zateo interview.
Yeah. Even Joe Walsh has come out and said, what are you doing here? I've endorsed Mamdani. Why can't Democrats? I just joined the party 2 minutes ago. That's number two. Number three is the key point, which you mentioned, which is the dissembling, which is your polite word for lying. Booker told Manu Raju of CNN, oh, I'm not going to get involved. He didn't have the guts to come out and just say, I'm not going to endorse Mamdani because I don't agree with him on Israel. No. He goes, oh, New York, I love New York. They're my neighbors. But I don't get involved in other people's races. I look at what's happening in New Jersey. You're a liar. Right? We can all see you're lying, Cory Booker, because within seconds, people like me and others found all the receipts online. They're all there. He endorsed Michael Bloomberg, who wasn't even a Democrat at the time, for mayor of New York. He reached out to Eric Adams to meet with him in D.C. when Adams went there as a triumphant king after winning his primary very narrowly by a squeak. He endorsed Karen Bass in L.A. when she was the Democratic mayoral nominee. Like, all the receipts are out.
And that's the opposite coast.
Opposite coast, not your next door state. So he lied, and he got caught lying. The internet caught him lying. And he's got this problem, Booker, because he's super ambitious. He wants to be president. He crashed and burned in 2020 when he was one of the many candidates who lost to Biden. And now I think he had high hopes for 2028. He did this epic speech, kind of semi-filibuster, but not really, which is now being turned into a book. But then he does the speech, and then what does he do after the speech? He pisses off resistance liberals by voting for Jared Kushner's dad to be ambassador to France, and he pisses off the left by going and voting for arms to go to Israel again, when everyone else is saying, even other Democrats who are pro-Israel like Klobuchar are saying, okay, let's not send weapons to Israel. So I think he's a little bit of a fraud. I think this is all going to catch up with him in 28. There was a poll earlier this year after his speech where he was like leading the candidates. He got this huge bump, and somebody said to me, "Is Cory Booker going to be the candidate?" I was like, hold on. Politics changes every week these days. Talk to me in a year, 2 years. We didn't have to wait a year or 2 years. I'd love to see that presidential poll right now and see where Booker is in the list.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting. I don't even know if he's listed at this point. Again, just throwing this out there, I'm sure you've thought about it. Cory Booker on Zateo, maybe on Mehdi Unfiltered.
I don't think he'd do it. I mean, we've asked him in the past. I've asked him at MSNBC. He wouldn't do it. A lot of these senators don't like tough interviews, which is why props to Alyssa Slotkin, who recently went on a YouTube show on Breaking Points with Crystal Ball and Saga Angeli. And, she took tough questions. But very few Democrats seem to want to do that these days.
Well, I guess I want to close with this, speaking of Democrats, because as somebody who, like I said, votes blue no matter who, I have been bitching endlessly about what Democrats have been doing. It feels like it's been a failed strategy. But Mehdi, they're finally finding their teeth. They're finally finding some degree of backbone. Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, even Kathy Hochul, who's the most feckless of all of them, saying that they will do tit-for-tat gerrymandering in retaliation for Texas. So just close the loop, give the final word to you. What is your assessment? You are critical of the Democratic Party for its observance of norms, its lack of fighting spirit. Yes. Are you pleased with what you're seeing so far? Where would you like to see them take it? Give us your stand of the situation.
So I've spent years calling for independent redistricting. I think it's insane that the United States of America allows gerrymandering. Most other Western democracies do not allow politicians to pick their own voters. They allow voters to pick their own politicians. You don't have politicians drawing their own lines of their own districts and constituencies. So I was pleased in places like Michigan, where they had independent redistricting get passed by independent vote, and now got set up. The problem is, of course, you have to do it at a national level. Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? It's unilateral disarmament. If a Democratic state says we're going to have neutral independent redistricting and next door Republican state says we're just going to draw the lines in our favor, that can't work. And the Democrats tried to get that done in the For the People Act in 2021. Joe Manchin joined with the Republicans to screw them over. Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer were unable or unwilling to get rid of the filibuster, and therefore we are where we are. So where we are, you have to fight by the rules that exist, and the rules that exist are the ones the Republicans are laying down. They're saying we're not going to do it at the beginning of every decade. We're going to do it in the middle of a decade. We're going to do it in the middle of an election campaign. We're going to do it brazenly for our own interest. A Republican lawmaker said on CNN today, we're doing it because we can and because it's good for our party. Okay, then that applies across the board. So yes, Newsom, Pritzker, Hochul, whoever else shouldn't just talk the talk. They have to walk the walk. They have to make Republicans pay. You have to fight fire with fire. I mean, it is long past time for Democrats to play dirty, because the Republicans have been playing dirty for a while. And you cannot, the analogy I always give, and I gave this on the Jon Stewart show, if you're playing football or soccer, as we say in the US, football where I'm from, and the other team is picking up the ball and running with it, and you're like, no, that's against the rules. You have to just dribble with your feet. You can't pick it up. You will lose that game. At some point, you have to stop and go, all right, they're picking up the ball. We're going to have to pick up the ball as well.
No, I totally agree. And so you would say that you are at least pleased with how Democrats are currently flexing and want to see more of it. And then
is it too little, too late? Yes. Is it too little, too late? Maybe. I mean, they had control of all three branches. They had control of the House, the Senate, the presidency. They didn't do Supreme Court reform. They didn't do redistricting reform. They didn't add Puerto Rico and D.C. Can you imagine if Puerto Rico and D.C. were Republican majority places? They would have been the 51st and 52nd states years ago. Republicans would be hanging around decades ago. Mm-hmm. So there were so many things the Democrats could have done had they been this evil partisan party that the Republicans see them. When I hear Republicans describe Democrats, I'm always like, if only.
Yeah, I wish.
I wish the Republican description of these evil, plotting, cynical, self-serving partisan Democrats who weaponize government. None of that's true. If only.
No, I agree that in so many ways I feel like we missed the ball. Supreme Court reform. I don't know if we'll ever catch that particular car again.
Biden kicked the commission. Biden kicked the commission into the long grass to commission on Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, Sheldon
right now,
Whitehouse.
Trump is at 6-3.
Sheldon Whitehouse is terrified about this. He's like, I don't know if it'll ever come up, because between the corruption at the Supreme Court, the Dobbs decision, it was as high salience of an issue I think it was naturally going to be, and we didn't even touch it. And the American people have proven we can get used to just about anything if you give us an amount of time. So I don't know if that will ever come back around again. But Mehdi, listen, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Congratulations on 1 million subscribers on Zateo's YouTube channel.
Much.
Is there anything you can preview coming down the pike that you've got cooking up? Any upcoming interviews, projects, debates, appearances?
We've got some big interviews coming up soon related to New York and the mayoral race in New York. We've got some good interviews coming up with some celebrities who've been speaking out on Gaza. I've got this debate with Michael Gove on Donald Trump's foreign policy, which will be dropping shortly. So that's keep your eye out for that. But yeah, do head to Zateo.com. Give us some support independent journalism.
Thank you so much, Mehdi.